31 biggest idiots in world's history. We're taught that history is shaped by brilliant minds and grand strategies. That's a nice story, but it leaves out the best part, the absolute morons. This isn't a list of minor missteps. This is a celebration of the 31 most magnificently incompetent figures to ever wield power, whose legendary blunders prove that a high rank and a low IQ is a timelessly explosive combination. 1. Charles Valentin Alcan, Death by Bookshelf. Let's start with a quiet death. A truly dumb, quiet death. Charles Valentin Alcan was a 19th century French composer and one of the greatest piano virtuosos of his time, a rival to Chopin and Liszt. So how did this musical titan meet his end? In a blaze of glory, finishing a masterpiece? No. According to legend, Alcan, a deeply religious man, was reaching for a copy of the Talmud on the very top shelf of his massive bookcase. As he pulled the book, the entire heavy piece of furniture tipped over and crushed him to death. You'd think a man who could command 88 keys with God-tier precision would have a better grasp of basic physics. This wasn't a dramatic, poetic ending. It was a final ironic footnote delivered by a piece of furniture. 2. Xerxes' Eye, the ocean whipping incident. Speaking of figures with an overinflated sense of their own power, let's talk about Xerxes' Eye, the king of Persia. When a violent storm destroyed his meticulously constructed pontoon bridges across the Hellespont Strait, Xerxes didn't just get mad. He got biblically, absurdly furious. He decided the sea itself was guilty of insubordination. So he did what any rational, all-powerful ruler would do. He ordered the ocean to be punished. His soldiers were commanded to whip the water 300 times while also shouting insults at it. They even branded the sea with hot irons. Imagine being the soldier tasked with that job. It's the ancient world's equivalent of yelling at a faulty printer, but with an entire army and a whole lot more theatricality. The sea, unsurprisingly, did not issue a formal apology. 3. Emperor Honorius, the chicken named Rome. If fighting the ocean seems dumb, how about prioritizing a chicken over your empire? Meet Roman Emperor Honorius. In 410 AD, the Goths were sacking the city of Rome, a truly cataclysmic event. A messenger rushed to the emperor and delivered the devastating news with the words, "Rome has perished." Instead of displaying shock or grief, Honorius reportedly breathed a huge sigh of relief. Why? Because he thought the messenger was talking about his favorite pet chicken, which he had cleverly named Rome. The capital of the Western world was burning to the ground, and the guy in charge was mainly concerned about the well-being of his poultry. You really can't make this stuff up. The empire might be collapsing, but thank God the chicken is okay. 4. Francois Angler, the roller skate disaster. Every great invention needs a great product demo. Francois Angler, the inventor of roller skates, understood this. To unveil his creation to the world in the 1760s, he planned a truly spectacular entrance at a fancy Parisian masquerade ball. He strapped on his newfangled skates, picked up his violin to play a tune, and gracefully rolled into the room. The crowd was stunned. What a genius! What flair! There was just one tiny, minuscule detail he had overlooked in his design process: a braking mechanism. Angler, gliding elegantly while playing music, suddenly realized he had no way to stop. He careened across the ballroom floor and crashed directly into a massive floor-to-ceiling mirror, shattering the glass, his violin, and his dignity all at once. 5. Sultan Ibrahim the Mad, the Harem Massacre. Next up is Ottoman Sultan Ibrahim, a man whose nickname, the Mad, wasn't just for show. It was a title he earned with gusto. Ibrahim had a few obsessions, including large women and lavish furs. But his defining characteristic was his explosive paranoia. One day, he became convinced that someone in his massive harem of 280 concubines had been unfaithful. His solution was not to launch an investigation. It was to implement a policy of total workforce liquidation. He ordered all 280 women to be bound in weighted sacks and thrown into the Bosphorus Strait to drown. It's a management style that is certainly decisive, if nothing else. Forget dealing with human resources. Ibrahim's approach was to just reboot the entire system by drowning it. 6. Thomas Austin, the rabbit apocalypse. Here's a lesson in unintended consequences served with a side of rabbit stew. In 1859, a British settler in Australia named Thomas Austin felt a bit homesick. What he missed most was hunting. So he thought it would be a splendid idea to import 24 wild European rabbits to his estate for a bit of sport. In his own fateful words, he declared that the introduction of a few rabbits could do little harm. This might just be the most catastrophic understatement in ecological history. Those few rabbits bred like, well, rabbits. Within 50 years, their population had exploded to an estimated 600 million, causing an environmental disaster, wiping out native species and devastating farmland across the continent. All because one guy just wanted to shoot something familiar. 7. Eugene Schieffelin, the Shakespeare bird fanatic. If you thought introducing rabbits was a bad idea, meet Eugene Schieffelin, a pharmacist from New York who was the world's biggest Shakespeare fanboy. His life's mission was truly bizarre. He wanted to introduce every single bird mentioned in the works of William Shakespeare to North America. In the 1890s, after a few failed attempts with other birds, he released about 60 European starlings into Central Park. Unfortunately for North America, the starlings thrived. Today, their population is over 200 million. They are an aggressive, destructive, invasive species that dries out native birds, devastates crops, and has even been responsible for downing aircraft. All this ecological chaos, not for profit or conquest, but because one dude really loved Shakespeare. 8. Pope Stephen VI, the cadaver trial. Most legal systems agree that the defendant should probably be alive for their trial. Pope Stephen VI, however, disagreed. In 897 AD, he held a grudge against his dead predecessor, Pope Formosus. So he arranged what is now known as the Cadaver Synod. He had Formosus' 9-month-old corpse dug up, dressed in full papal robes, and propped up on a throne in the courtroom to face charges. A terrified young deacon was appointed to act as the corpse's defense attorney, forced to answer questions on behalf of the rotting body. Unsurprisingly, the deceased pope was found guilty. As punishment, his fingers of blessing were hacked off and his body was dragged through the streets and thrown into the river. It's a stunning reminder that even the highest office on earth isn't immune to petty, raving lunacy. 9. Shah Muhammad II provoking Genghis Khan. If there was ever a historical moment that perfectly illustrates the concept fuck around and find out, this is it. In the early 13th century, Genghis Khan, a man you really didn't want to annoy, sent a diplomatic and trade mission to the neighboring Khwarezmian Empire. The ruler, Shah Muhammad II, had a brilliant idea. Instead of welcoming them, he decided to execute the Mongol ambassadors. Now, there are a few universal rules in diplomacy, and rule number 1 is you don't kill the messenger. The Shah didn't just break this rule, he shattered it. Genghis Khan's response was not a sternly worded letter. It was the complete and utter annihilation of the Khwarezmian Empire. He didn't just conquer it, he erased it from the map. A brutal lesson in why you never, ever poke the hornet's nest. 10. Francisco Solano Lopez, the Triple Alliance War. Everyone needs a role model, but it's probably best to pick one that's within your league. Francisco Solano Lopez, the dictator of Paraguay in the mid-19th century, saw himself as the Napoleon of South America. Filled with this grandiose self-image, he decided to prove his military genius by launching the War of the Triple Alliance. The problem? The Triple Alliance consisted of Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. He literally declared war on his 3 much larger neighbors at the same time. It was less of a strategic masterpiece and more of a national suicide pact. The result was one of the most catastrophic conflicts in modern history, leading to the deaths of up to 70% of Paraguay's adult male population. He may have thought he was Napoleon, but he ended up being the architect of his own nation's demographic collapse. 11. Emperor Pertinax, cutting the Praetorian Guard's pay. Here's a quick lesson in management from the Roman Empire. When Emperor Pertinax took power in 193 AD, he inherited a corrupt and undisciplined Praetorian Guard. These were the elite imperial bodyguards who had just murdered his predecessor. Pertinax decided his very first order of business should be to instill discipline and, most importantly, cut their pay. Let that sink in. His plan was to reform his own notoriously violent, sword-wielding bodyguards by taking away their money. It's a classic case of completely misreading the room. The Praetorian Guard responded to this brilliant HR initiative exactly as you'd expect. After just 87 days on the job, they stormed the palace and murdered him. It was a reign so short, he barely had time to warm the throne. 12. Didius Julianus, buying the Roman Empire. If you can't earn it, why not just buy it? After the murder of Pertinax, the Praetorian Guard did something truly incredible. They put the Roman Empire up for auction. The highest bidder was a wealthy senator named Didius Julianus. He literally bought the throne by offering more cash to the guards than his rival. For a brief moment, he was the most powerful man in the world. The only problem was that he had zero political support, no loyalty from the legions, and the Roman people loathed him. His reign was a 66-day-long farce that ended when a more competent general, Septimius Severus, marched on Rome. Julianus was promptly executed. He learned the hard way that you can buy the title, but you can't buy actual power, especially when the sellers are the only friends you have. 13. Sultan Murad IV, the coffee executioner. Sultan Murad IV of the Ottoman Empire was a man of contradictions. He was deeply concerned about public order and believed that coffee houses were breeding ground for political dissent and rebellion. His solution? A complete ban on coffee. He was so serious about it that he would reportedly disguise himself and walk the streets of Istanbul at night. And if he caught anyone drinking coffee, he would execute them on the spot. So what was the preferred beverage of this stern moral guardian? Alcohol. Murad was a notorious, raging alcoholic. He banned the drink that fueled conversation and intellectual debate while personally consuming a substance known for causing chaos and poor judgment. It's hypocrisy on a truly imperial scale. 14. Oliver Cromwell, the War on Fun. If you've ever met a person who just radiates joylessness, they were probably channeling Oliver Cromwell. As the Lord Protector of England in the 17th century, this puritanical leader decided that fun was the enemy. He launched a full-scale war on happiness. Cromwell and his government banned Christmas celebrations, closed all theaters, outlawed most sports, and even restricted the wearing of makeup. He essentially tried to turn an entire country into a joyless, gray waiting room. The English people hated it so much that after he died and the monarchy was restored, they didn't just move on. They dug up Cromwell's body, put his corpse on trial for treason, and executed him posthumously. That's how much they missed their parties. 15. King Louis XVI, the luxurious escape attempt. When you're a king on the run for your life during a violent revolution, subtlety is key. This was a lesson French King Louis XVI completely failed to learn. As the French Revolution raged, he and his family attempted to escape the country. But they didn't do it quietly in the dead of night. No, they commissioned a massive, brand new, incredibly luxurious and slow-moving carriage. To make matters worse, they didn't exactly keep a low profile on the road, stopping for fancy meals and to greet people who recognized them. It was less of a desperate escape and more of a royal parade. Unsurprisingly, they were easily identified and arrested, a blunder that sealed their fate with the guillotine. It was the dumbest getaway plan in history. 16. Ethelred the Unready, paying the Vikings forever. Sometimes a person's nickname tells you everything you need to know. Meet Ethelred the Unready, a 10th century king of England. Now, unready, it doesn't mean he forgot his keys. It's Old English for ill-advised. And boy, did he earn that name. His grand strategy for dealing with constant Viking invasions was to simply pay them to go away. This payment was called the Danegeld. It worked beautifully for a while. The Vikings would take the massive bribe and leave. But then they realized something. If you could get paid a fortune for almost invading England, why not just come back next year and ask for more? Ethelred's policy turned England into the world's most reliable ATM for raiders, bleeding his kingdom dry and ensuring the Vikings would always return. 17. Thomas Midgley Jr., the most harmful inventor. Some people leave a mark on history. Thomas Midgley Jr. left a giant toxic crater. This American chemist is quite possibly the single human being who has caused the most damage to the planet. First, in the 1920s, he invented leaded gasoline to stop car engines from knocking. This released immense quantities of neurotoxic lead into the atmosphere, poisoning generations of people and the environment. But he wasn't done. He then went on to invent Freon, the first chlorofluorocarbon, which became the go-to refrigerant and aerosol propellant. This single invention tore a massive hole in the Earth's ozone layer. In a final, darkly ironic twist, he died after getting entangled and strangling himself in a system of ropes and pulleys he designed to help him get out of bed after contracting polio. He was literally killed by his own bad invention. 18. Alexander Bogdanov, blood transfusion death. The quest for eternal youth has led people to do some strange things. But Russian physician and revolutionary Alexander Bogdanov took it to a whole new blood-soaked level. He believed he could achieve rejuvenation and possibly even immortality through experimental blood transfusions. He founded an entire institute dedicated to this idea. In 1928, Bogdanov decided to perform his 12th transfusion on himself. The donor was a student suffering from both malaria and tuberculosis. Bogdanov, blinded by his own theories, saw no issue with this. The result was predictable. Shortly after pumping himself full of diseased blood, he died a painful death. He wasn't just wrong. His quest for eternal life directly and idiotically led to his own demise. 19. Albert Brisbane, the lemonade ocean prophet. If you think blood transfusions for immortality is weird, let me introduce you to the concept of a lemonade ocean. Albert Brisbane was a follower of the utopian socialist Charles Fourier, a philosopher with some, let's say, imaginative ideas. One of Fourier's most famous predictions was that in a future state of perfect social harmony, the oceans would lose their saltiness and turn into a delicious planet-sized glass of lemonade. Brisbane wasn't just a passive believer in this theory. He was an evangelist for it. He spent a significant portion of his personal fortune and dedicated his life to promoting Fourier's ideas, including the imminent arrival of the great global lemonade sea. You have to admire the optimism, but you also have to question the sanity of a man waiting for the tide to come in tasting of citrus. 20. Muhammad bin Tughlaq, the Sultan of Bad Ideas. Muhammad bin Tughlaq, the 14th century Sultan of Delhi, was a man of grand ideas. Unfortunately, they were all spectacularly stupid. First, he decided to move his empire's capital from Delhi to Daulatabad, a city over 1,100 kilometers away. He didn't just move his court. He ordered the entire population of Delhi to march there. Many died along the way. Then, after arriving, he changed his mind and ordered everyone to march back. But his genius didn't stop there. He also introduced a new currency, minting copper and brass coins and declaring them to have the same value as gold and silver. This immediately led to mass counterfeiting. People were literally minting coins in their kitchens and triggered a complete economic collapse. He was a one-man wrecking ball of bad policy. 21. Arthur III, the repeatedly captured Duke. The phrase, "learn from your mistakes," was clearly not in the vocabulary of Arthur III, the Duke of Brittany. During the 100 Years' War, this French nobleman developed an unfortunate habit, getting captured by the English. It happened once, and his family paid a massive ransom to get him back. You'd think he'd be a bit more careful after that, but no. He was captured a second time, and again a huge ransom was paid. At this point, any rational person would probably stay away from battles for a while. Not Arthur. He went back into the fight and, like clockwork, was captured for a third time. Each time his release cost a fortune. He was less of a warrior and more of a recurring, incredibly expensive subscription service for the English army. 22. Otto I of Bavaria, the insane shooting king. Being a king usually involves, ruling, but for Otto I of Bavaria, the job was purely ceremonial, mostly because he was declared legally insane before he even took the throne. For his entire 27-year reign in the late 19th century, Otto lived in seclusion in a castle under constant medical supervision, completely unaware of his royal status. He wasn't making decrees or meeting diplomats. His days were spent in a state of severe mental illness. His most notable royal activity was apparently taking pot shots at local peasants with his hunting rifle from his castle window. He was a king in name only, a monarch whose throne sat empty while he lived out his days as a prisoner of his own mind and a danger to local farmers. 23. The Jiajing Emperor, Mercury Immortality Pills. The Jiajing Emperor of China in the 16th century was obsessed with one thing: living forever. He neglected his duties as emperor to focus entirely on his quest for immortality, turning to his court alchemists for a solution. These scientists cooked up a variety of life-extending elixirs for him. The key ingredient in many of these magical potions? Mercury. The emperor dutifully consumed these concoctions, believing they were purifying his body and leading him to eternal life. Instead, as modern science could have told him, he was just slowly and systematically poisoning himself with a heavy metal. In a twist that should have surprised absolutely no one, the emperor's elixir of immortality ended up killing him. A classic case of the cure being infinitely worse than the disease. 24. Mithridates VI, immune to his own suicide. Mithridates VI of Pontus was the most paranoid king in the ancient world. His greatest fear was being assassinated by poison. To combat this, he developed a meticulous routine of taking tiny, non-lethal doses of every poison known to man, hoping to build up total immunity. For years, he was his own personal walking toxicology lab. And in a way, it worked. When the Romans finally defeated him in battle, he chose suicide over capture. He reached for his trusty vial of poison, the one weapon he believed would work, and drank it. Nothing happened. His lifelong paranoia had paid off so well that he literally couldn't poison himself. In a final, frustrating irony, he had to order one of his own guards to kill him with a sword. 25. The Cambodian King's Naval Dream. Leaders often rely on advisors, intelligence reports, or strategic analysis to make critical decisions. A certain 19th century king of Cambodia, however, relied on his dreams. According to historical accounts, this monarch had a particularly vivid nightmare one night in which he saw his entire navy being utterly destroyed. Instead of waking up and dismissing it as a bad dream, he took it as a divine prophecy. The very next morning, he gave a shocking order: dismantle the entire Cambodian fleet. Just like that, based on a single bad dream, the nation's naval defense was gone. It's a foreign policy decision-making process that makes flipping a coin seem like a sophisticated strategic exercise. One can only wonder what would have happened if he had dreamt his palace was made of cheese. 26. King Farouk, the royal kleptomaniac. Most monarchs collect art, land, or titles. King Farouk of Egypt collected things he stole. He was a kleptomaniac on an international scale. This wasn't a secret habit. It was a well-known part of his character. He would pilfer everything from ceremonial swords to random trinkets from his hosts and fellow dignitaries. His most audacious and famous theft occurred during a meeting with Winston Churchill. While the British Prime Minister was distracted, King Farouk managed to steal his prized pocket watch right from his vest. Churchill, a man not easily rattled, eventually realized what had happened and had to diplomatically demand its return. It's one thing to be a king, but it's another level of audacity to be a king who is also a common pickpocket. 27. Algernon Sidney, executed by his own manuscript. Writing can be a powerful tool for expressing ideas. For the 17th century English politician Algernon Sidney, it was also a self-signed death warrant. Sidney was a staunch Republican who opposed the idea of absolute monarchy. He wrote down his political theories in a manuscript called Discourses Concerning Government, arguing that monarchs did not have a divine right to rule and that citizens had the right to resist tyranny. The problem? He never published it. When he was accused of treason, government agents searched his home, found the unpublished manuscript, and used his own private writings as the primary evidence against him at his trial. He was convicted and executed based on words he had written for himself. He literally rode his way to the gallows. 28. Tsar Nicholas II, taking command with zero experience. When your country is embroiled in the largest war in human history, you need your best people in charge of the military. Tsar Nicholas II of Russia had a different idea. In the middle of World War I, with Russia suffering devastating losses, he made the catastrophic decision to dismiss the experienced commander-in-chief of the army and take personal command himself. The only problem? He had absolutely zero military experience. This move was a disaster. It meant that every subsequent military failure, every defeat, and every casualty was now directly and personally associated with him. This decision didn't just fuck the war effort. It shattered his reputation, fueled public anger, and massively accelerated the arrival of the Russian Revolution that would ultimately destroy him and his entire family. 29. The Ming Dynasty burning the treasure fleet. In the early 15th century, China possessed the most powerful and advanced naval fleet on the planet. The legendary treasure fleet, commanded by Admiral Zheng, he consisted of massive ships that dwarfed anything in Europe. They explored the Indian Ocean, reached Africa and Arabia, and established a commanding Chinese presence across the seas. And then the emperor decided it was all a waste of money. In a stunning reversal, the Ming Dynasty leadership declared that foreign exploration was unnecessary. They ordered the entire treasure fleet to be destroyed, burned, and left to rot. China turned inward, adopting a policy of isolationism that would last for centuries. They had the world at their fingertips and simply decided to throw it all away. A decision that changed the course of global history. 30. Pánfilo de Narvaez, the Florida disaster. Pánfilo de Narvaez was a Spanish conquistador who led what is arguably the single most disastrous expedition in the history of the Americas. In 1528, he landed in Florida with about 400 men and a fleet of ships. His first brilliant move was to split his forces. He sent the ships to sail up the coast to meet him later, while he led his men on a march inland through the dense, hostile, and completely unknown swamps of Florida. Surprise, surprise. The ships and the land party never found each other. Narvaez's men were plagued by starvation, disease, and constant attacks from native tribes. They ended up desperately building crude rafts to try to sail to Mexico. Of the original 400 men who went ashore, only 4 survived the ordeal. It was a masterclass in how not to explore. 31. General John Sedgwick, famous last words. Sometimes a person's final words are a profound summary of their life. Other times, they are a monument to spectacular miscalculation. General John Sedgwick was a respected Union commander during the American Civil War. At the Battle of Spotsylvania in 1864, he was directing his troops when he noticed some of them were ducking to avoid enemy sniper fire from a great distance. Annoyed by their cowardice, Sedgwick stood tall and chided them with the now infamous last words, "They couldn't hit an elephant at this distance." A mere moment later, a Confederate sniper's bullet struck him just below the left eye, killing him instantly. It was a tragic, ironic, and brutally effective lesson in not underestimating your enemy, delivered at a velocity of over 800 meters per second. 31 exhibits of glorious, world-altering incompetence. But we know the Hall of Shame is vast and the competition is fierce. So who is the one unforgivable omission from this list? Whose monumental act of idiocy do we criminally overlook? And why do they deserve the 30-second spot? Make your case in the comments below. If you enjoyed this trial of terrible decisions, render your verdict on that like button and subscribe for more historical disasters.